Hi, welcome back to the channel. If you're enjoying the stuff you're seeing here, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more videos and contents. Today we're going to be looking at vintages. What is a vintage? What does it mean? How does it affect the wine? Should you take any notice of it? So when somebody says vintage in terms of wine, what they're talking about is the year that that wine comes from. So it's the year that the grapes that the wine was made from are grown. So for example, the bottle I have here, the Torres Mas La Plana, very famous wine, top of the range stuff, but this has a vintage of 2015. So what that means is that the grapes that went into making this wine were grown in 2015. So the way the vintage is going to make a difference is it's a reflection of the growing conditions of that year. If there was favorable conditions, if there was sun at the right time, if they had the right amount of weather, if the soil was being kind, all these different factors that go into growing the grapes. If it was a good year, you'll have good grapes. You know, top vintages will produce fantastic grapes. Now you can still make bad wine from good grapes, but you cannot make good wine from bad grapes. So if it's a good vintage, it's always a good indication. How do you know what a good vintage is? You have to research it. I would still look up a lot of this stuff. You know, I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of vintages. I know some good ones for certain areas. And again, the vintages can vary. You know, they may have been a very good vintage in France or certain areas of France and not in other areas, or it may have been a good vintage across all of France and not in Spain, but it was in Portugal, but not in Italy. So all these things can make a difference. Nobody really knows off the top of their head every area of every country in the world and whether it was a good vintage going back however many years. But for example, I know, because I've tasted a lot of wine from Champagne, the region in France, that 1996 was a fantastic vintage. Now again, you still got some bad Champagnes that year, but generally they produced excellent grapes for that style of wine that year. So does it make a difference? At the cheaper end, not necessarily, and that's purely because of the way they're making these wines. They're probably growing them in very industrialized conditions where the grapes, even if it was a good year, they're being grown to what's called high yields. So all the grapes are grown in a very tight space, so the nutrients in the soil are distributed between more grapes, therefore they're not getting as much flavor packed into them. It's economy of scale, but I mean that's why that wine will cost less than a bottle of Mas La Plana. Now a bottle of Mas La Plana, because of the way they're making the wine, where the grapes are grown, you know, much less, much fewer grapes are grown per square hectare, as it's called in wine, or square acre, square kilometer, whatever you want to call it. Therefore, you've got less grapes to disperse the nutrients between. So between things like that, the way they produce the wine, and the fact that it was a good vintage as well, will mean that in theory, the juice inside this bottle should be absolutely tip top. So in answer to your question, does vintage matter? At the lower end or the cheaper end, not always quite so much, although it will have an effect. At the top end, 100% you should certainly be paying attention to the vintage. If you're not sure, I'll put some resources in the description box below where you can check out vintage charts and do a bit of research if you need to. So if you've got a bit of use out of that, don't forget to hit the like button. Like I said, it really helps the channel out, and if you want more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe.